Hello and welcome wherever you are in the world. If your thoughts feel heavy tonight like thick snow on a mountain roof, you're not alone. Maybe you're lying in bed somewhere in Oregon as the pine trees whisper outside your window. Or perhaps it's 3 a.m. in a quiet apartment in Berlin where the radiator ticks like an old clock and the air feels like it hasn't moved for hours. Wherever you are, whenever you are, I invite you to leave a soft comment, just a little note about where you're listening from, what time it is, and how your heart is feeling tonight. It may be quiet here, but you're not drifting alone. And if this strange and silent walk through the past brings even a thread of calm to your night, consider tapping a gentle like or subscribing with a sleepy nod. It helps this peaceful corner of the world stay open for all who wander through the dark. Now breathe in and out. Let the noise dissolve. Let your room soften. Let the sheets wrap around you like an old temple bell wraps silence. Because tonight we are not in your city or even in your century. We are slipping far east into the frost-bitten stillness of northern Japan, into mountain forests where no one walks anymore. We are stepping back hundreds of years into the era of temples lost to time, and monks who sat so long in meditation that their breath became mist and their hearts became myths. We are about to meet those who faced death not as a wall but as a doorway. They were the monks of the Sokushinbutsu, the ones who sat still and froze themselves into eternity. But they didn't freeze in fear. They chose this end inch by inch, root by root, prayer by prayer, until even the earth forgot they were alive. This is not a tale of martyrdom, nor is it a horror story. It is something else. A meditation carved in ice on how to vanish slowly enough to be remembered forever. Let's begin. The first thing you feel is the silence. It's not the absence of sound, but the presence of something heavier, like snowfall, that muffles not just footsteps but memory. You're standing in the northern mountains of Japan, far from the cities and the pulse of modern life. The trees here are taller than cathedrals and older than the names you've ever heard. Wind snakes through them like incense in a forgotten temple. It's cold, but not violently so, more like a stillness that seeps into your bones with the patience of centuries. You step forward. The forest gives way to a slope, and at its summit, half buried in snow, you see the shrine. It doesn't announce itself. There are no signs, no banners, no footsteps leading to its door. Just a square of worn wood carved into the hillside, its roof hunched beneath the weight of last night's snow. Icicles hang like glass blades from its eaves, catching the faint sunlight that filters through the mist. You approach slowly, not out of fear, but reverence. Each step makes a soft crunch beneath your feet, then disappears as if the snow is swallowing your presence. When you reach the entrance, you notice how the wind stops here, as if the air itself holds its breath. A small bell hangs by the door, rusted but unbroken. You touch it gently, and it makes the faintest chime like a whisper across time. Inside, it's darker than you expected. The light doesn't follow you in. It fades just at the doorway like it's not allowed to pass. You blink, letting your eyes adjust. Then you see him. He's not lying down. He's sitting, legs crossed in the lotus position, hands in his lap, back straight. He wears the robes of a monk, faded orange and brown, stiffened by time. His skin is dark and dry, like bark pulled tight across bone. His eyes are closed. His lips are pressed together in the calmest stillness you've ever seen. Not a statue, not quite a corpse. Something in between. He is not dead in the way you understand death. He is Sokushinbutsu. You don't speak. You can't. The air feels too old here for words. Instead, you step to the side, letting your gaze adjust to the rest of the room. There are offerings on the floor, dried flowers, old coins, a bundle of rice wrapped in faded cloth. A child's drawing, a prayer written in trembling hiragana. None of it is new, but none of it has rotted either. Everything in this space seems suspended, like it belongs to neither time nor decay. There's a plaque near his feet written in delicate calligraphy. You can't read all the words, but one line stands out as if it was carved for you. Asterisk, asterisk. He chose eternity one breath at a time. Asterisk, asterisk. Outside, the wind howls again, but it feels distant now. You're wrapped in something quieter, deeper. You wonder what it takes to end this way. Not in violence, not in madness, but in devotion so profound that it outlives the body. You sit. It feels natural, like the space around you expects it. And as you breathe slowly, carefully, you start to imagine the beginning. Before the shrine, before the stillness, before the man in front of you became what he is now. There was once a trail, nearly invisible now, winding up from the foot of the mountain. In another life, it was walked by a man with a name, with breath in his chest and frost clinging to his lashes. A monk, yes, but not yet a mummy. He carried nothing on his back, no food, no scrolls, just a small wooden bowl and the will to disappear. The trail was not made for tourists or pilgrims. It was made by feet that didn't plan to return. With each step he took, the forest folded behind him like a closing book. His world grew smaller, quieter, until even the sound of his own heartbeat began to feel like too much. Some say he fasted for 1,000 days. Some say he drank the sap of poison trees to shrink his flesh from within. Others say he welcomed worms, the slow decay of skin and self, as a final offering. But for now you see only the beginning, a man in thin robes walking into the mountains, snowflakes settling on his shoulders like prayers. He doesn't turn back. He won't. And neither, it seems, will you. You close your eyes. For a moment it feels like you're there, walking behind him, your breath joining his in the winter air. No destination. Only the long, slow journey into stillness. The shrine around you creaks. The monk doesn't move. But something inside you does. You wonder what it means to be so still the world forgets to call you dead. And you realize this is only the first step. You return to the trail, to the man before he became the memory, sitting in the shrine. It is early morning, though the sun barely pierces the shroud of mist tangled in the cedars. You see him again, barefoot, wrapped in coarse robes that flutter in the mountain breeze. His face is lean, weathered, but not gaunt. Not yet. His eyes do not search the trees or the sky. They look inward, as if every step he takes leads not through the forest but through his own soul. The air smells of cold earth, damp moss, and pine resin. Every now and then the soft call of a mountain bird echoes like a bell in a silent monastery. He walks without hurry, without hesitation. His name, long forgotten to the world, is still tender on the lips of the few who whispered prayers for him as he left. But he did not want those prayers to call him back. He walked away, not to escape the world, but to outlast it. In the small pouch at his side he carries a bundle of roots, bitter, twisted things with a sharp, acrid smell. You wouldn't know it unless you studied the ancient texts or heard the monks speak in hushed tones by candlelight. But these roots come from the urushi tree, the same tree whose sap was once used to lacquer bowls and masks, the same sap that hardens into glass-like perfection and poisons anything that drinks it. He chews one root between his teeth. Slowly. This is not suicide. This is preparation. The poison is not strong enough to kill him outright. That is not the point. It is slow, deliberate. The urushi sap begins to purge his body, diarrhea, vomiting, a relentless cleansing of the flesh. His muscles ache. His belly churns. His breath grows shallow. But he accepts it all because he knows what he is doing. He is emptying himself. Not just of food or fat or moisture, but of anything that would allow his body to rot when death arrives. Because this is his vow, that his skin shall not decay, that his bones shall not scatter, that he shall sit in meditation through the end of time. You follow his steps as they lead to a clearing between two towering stones. Here, sheltered beneath a natural overhang, lies the beginning of his final temple. There is no roof, no altar, only earth, stone, and silence. He kneels and begins to dig, not with tools but with his hands. The soil is cold, damp, clinging to his fingers like wet paper. He does not shiver. Every handful of dirt is a prayer. He digs a pit just wide enough for his seated body. Then he rests. Not because he is tired, though he is, but because rest is part of the ritual. Every movement now must be deliberate. There can be no wasted energy, no idle gesture. The forest watches. The gods of wind and frost watch. Even the worms beneath the surface seem to pause. That night, as frost gathers on his eyebrows, he lights a single candle. Its flame dances blue and thin like a soul unmoored from the body. He places a small bell beside him, his only companion for what lies ahead. And he sits, not to sleep, but to wait. The days that follow bleed into each other. The pain deepens. The poison continues its work, tightening his organs like cords wrapped around a drum. He drinks water infused with pine bark and stone dust. He eats nothing. He does not speak. He does not dream. Each morning he rings the bell once, so the monks in the village below will know he is still alive. One chime like the heartbeat of a world in slow retreat. You sit beside him in imagination, if not in body. You feel your own spine straighten, your breath slow. Around you the cold grows heavier. Snowflakes spiral from the canopy above and land softly on your shoulders. He rings the bell again. Another day passed. You wonder what he thinks about. Does he remember the warmth of rice bowls? The sound of children laughing in the temple courtyard? The way the light used to filter through paper walls? Or has he let all that go? Perhaps he is no longer thinking at all. Perhaps the silence inside him has grown so vast, so complete, that even memory refuses to echo. You glance at the bell. You count the chimes. One each morning, until one morning comes when the bell does not ring. And the forest knows. The monks know. The world knows. But no one rushes up the trail. No one digs him out, because that too is part of the vow. He must remain in silence, in darkness, in position, for 1,000 days more. So the earth can test him, to see if he truly meant to endure beyond death. And only after those days pass, when the wind has shifted and the moss has grown thick over the stone, will they return. With hands careful as prayer, they will unearth the wooden box that holds him. They will open it slowly, and inside they will see the miracle of stillness. Skin unbroken, teeth intact, eyes closed, fingers resting gently in his lap, just as they were on the day he began. But for now, here in this clearing, the man is still alive, still breathing, still ringing the bell with a hand that trembles more with each sunrise. And you somehow are there, breathing with him, feeling time dissolve not in seconds but in snowflakes. And maybe, just maybe, understanding what it means to choose your own ending. One breath at a time, the bell no longer rings. You don't hear the silence as an absence of sound. You feel it like a presence, as if something vast and invisible has stepped into the clearing, and now sits with the same stillness as the man beneath the ground. It is the 8th day without a chime, and in the village temple, far below the mountain, the old priest lowers his head in quiet recognition. No words are spoken. No drums are beaten. The monk has entered the deeper phase of the ritual, and all must wait. Back on the mountain, snow begins to fall again, thin and soft like the ash of burnt prayers. You return to the edge of the pit. There is no visible opening anymore. It has been sealed not with stone or bricks, but with layers of cedar planks and compacted earth. The man beneath it is no longer alive in the way the villagers understand life, but he is not yet dead either. His breath may have stopped, his heart may have stilled, but his presence remains suspended between decay and divinity. And still the forest watches, not with curiosity, but with the unblinking patience of mountains that have seen monks like him come and go for centuries. A squirrel scrambles across a nearby branch but does not approach the site. A fox pads silently past the trail but avoids the edge of the clearing. Even the crows stay distant, circling higher, silent. Something sacred hums here now, not in words or chants, but in the very texture of the air. It smells different: dried bark, old smoke, the ghost of incense that has not burned in years. Then footsteps, not yours, soft, deliberate, muffled by snow. You turn and see another figure arrive, a monk in a faded gray robe, the hood drawn over his head. His hands are bare red with cold, but he carries nothing. He stops just short of the pit and lowers himself to his knees. There is no mourning in his posture, no grief, only reverence, as if he's bowing not to a man but to the shape of truth made visible. He places a bundle on the ground beside him. It's a simple offering: a folded white cloth, a carved wooden bowl, and a single lotus root. Then he speaks. His voice is a whisper, but it travels clearly through the still air. "Brother," he says, "may the worms forget you. It is not a curse, it is a blessing. In this tradition, decay is not welcome. To rot is to fail. The monks who become Sokushinbutsu do not hope to vanish, they hope to remain. To sit forever untouched by time and decomposition, as proof that the body can become more than mere flesh." The man kneeling rises again and walks backward from the clearing, never turning his back. You watch until he disappears into the trees, and the snow erases his footprints one flake at a time. Years pass. You feel them not in numbers, but in the slow transformation of the landscape. The wooden box beneath the earth becomes part of the mountain's memory. Roots grow around it, not through it. Animals pass by it without stopping. Storms come and go, and yet the clearing remains undisturbed. Then, finally, after 1,000 days and 1,000 nights, a small procession ascends the mountain. 3 monks, each in silence, each carrying a tool, one a spade, one a lantern, one a prayer book worn thin by age. They arrive at the spot and begin to dig gently, layer by layer, until the cedar boards appear. They stop. They bow. And then, with breath held in shared anticipation, they lift the lid. You lean forward in time with them. Inside the box, the body remains. It is not preserved by chemicals. No oils were used. No wrappings bind him. And yet the skin is whole. The nails have not cracked. The teeth have not crumbled. The eyes remain closed, not forced shut, but resting, as if sleep was never interrupted. He sits still as he once did in life, as he always intended to remain. The monks do not touch him. They kneel. They offer no chant. Instead, they whisper the same words the last monk once spoke at the grave's edge. "May the worms forget you." You see it now. What he chose was not escape. It was endurance, a challenge to the very laws of flesh and earth, a way to say, "I will not vanish." They lift the box not as coffin but as reliquary, and carefully, reverently, they carry him down the mountain. Back to the temple, back to the shrine where you first saw him. You return to that moment, the candlelight flickering over his folded hands, the dust motes hanging in the air like prayers too shy to land. He has been waiting for you, not to worship him, not to understand him, but simply to sit, to listen, to feel what stillness can become when silence is made sacred. You sit again, and you listen not with your ears but with your breath. Outside the snow continues to fall, but inside in the temple where he waits time no longer moves forward. It waits, just like you. You return in your mind to the day the monks placed his body in the shrine. The procession moves slowly, not because the path was steep, but because every step was sacred. The wind rustled through the forest as if the trees themselves were bowing one branch at a time. They carried him in a wooden box, plain and unvarnished, with no carvings, no inscriptions, because to adorn the vessel would be to draw attention away from the silence it held. The villagers did not gather. There was no crowd, no celebration, only a hush that fell like early snow across the temple grounds. You stand just outside the shrine now, watching as the monks remove their shoes before entering. The door creaks softly open and the cold breath of the mountain follows them inside. The air is thick with centuries of incense, faint sandalwood traces of cedar smoke, the ghost of winter prayers. Inside they place him on the small wooden dais. They do not speak. They do not weep. They adjust his robes, careful not to disturb his posture, and wipe the dust from his folded hands with a cloth dipped in spring water. One monk places a single camellia flower in a bowl beside him, its petals bright red against the muted tones of the room. And then, as if rehearsed for lifetimes, they step back together. They bow, and they leave. The door closes with a soft wooden sigh. You step inside only after the silence settles again. The room is unchanged since you first entered. He is there, seated still as memory. But now you understand what it took for him to be here. The agony, the preparation, the waiting, the transformation of his body into a message not written in ink but in flesh that refuses to decay. You sit. You listen, and slowly you begin to imagine the others, because he was not the only one. In hidden valleys and deep forest caves across Japan's northern provinces, there were others who chose the same path. Not many. Fewer than 30 have ever been found, but they were there, silent, determined, their lives devoted to a vanishing. You picture one now, another monk in a different century in a different province, walking barefoot through the snow. His name was Jinin, though no one calls him that now. He was tall for his time, with a face shaped like a leaf and eyes that always seemed to be reading the air. He lived in a small temple near the river where winters were cruel and the mountains whispered through frozen branches. He was known for tending the fires at dawn and speaking rarely except to the sick, to whom his voice was gentler than the morning bell. He began his journey with a single question whispered during zazen meditation. What does it mean to die without leaving? For months the question circled inside him like smoke inside a bell jar. He began to change his diet. No more rice, no more fermented beans. He consumed roots, bark, and needles, everything that purified the body and stripped it of softness. His cheeks grew hollow. His skin tightened. Yet his eyes never lost their calm. He laughed once, a sound so rare that even the head monk stopped what he was doing. I am becoming emptiness, he said. And he was right. When he left the temple, he left no note. Only a bowl and a folded robe placed at the altar of Kannon the Bodhisattva of compassion. He walked north, to a cave in the rocks, where moss grew in thick carpets and no birds sang in winter. There he began his final sitting. For weeks he drank only water mixed with pine sap. He meditated until his legs no longer ached and his back no longer bent. His body dried. His thoughts thinned. His pulse slowed, until one morning the cave echoed with no breath. When monks came to retrieve him years later, they found his body upright, his spine still straight, his face so peaceful that one monk wept, though he didn't know why. They placed him in a shrine like this one, far from roads, far from noise. And now, just like the monk, you sit before Jinin rests in an unbroken state, silent, unrotted beyond forgetting. You open your eyes. You hadn't realized they were closed. The candle beside you flickers. The air feels thinner, as if the room itself remembers all of them, not just the one you see. You wonder how many sat like this who were never found? How many became stillness in caves, that collapsed in forests, that grew over their graves in silence so perfect even the wind forgot their names? And yet something remains. You feel it now in your chest. Not a chill, not sorrow. Something more difficult to name. As if for just a moment your own heartbeat is not entirely your own. As if part of you is sitting there, two spine-straight hands folded, waiting not to be remembered, but to be still. Forever. You awaken in the same position you fell asleep, though you don't remember drifting off. Your legs have gone numb, and the wooden floor beneath you presses against your bones like cold stone. Outside, dawn has arrived. Barely. A thin ribbon of light slants through the paper window, casting long, trembling shadows across the room. The monk sits exactly as before. Time has not touched him, but you feel something has changed in you. You rise slowly, every joint stiff, your body reminded that it belongs to the realm of the perishable. You step outside. The cold air meets your face like an old ritual, sharp, cleansing reel. You breathe in deeply, and the forest opens before you, vast and empty. The path you climbed is still there, barely a trail now, more a suggestion made by the way the snow lies. But before you take that path again, you linger, because something still pulls you inward, not just toward this monk, but toward the others. They call to you not in voices but in feelings, in flickers of story buried beneath centuries of snowfall. And so once more you imagine another cave, another figure, another time. This one is deeper in the mountains, nearer to the sea, where the storms roll in with sudden violence and the wind tastes of salt. The monk here was older when he began. His name was unknown even to the villagers who brought him water each month. They called him the one who waits. He was tall and thin, with fingers like willow twigs, and a spine so bowed from decades of kneeling that he moved through the world like a question mark. But his mind was clear, sharper than any blade. He chose his cave not for beauty or shelter, but for its acoustics. When the wind moved through it, it sounded like breathing, like the cave itself was alive, meditating with him. He ate the same bitter roots, drank the same bitter sap, but he added one more thing: silence. Absolute silence. No words, no chants, no mantras. For 5 years before sealing himself away, he uttered not a syllable. And in that silence his body softened. Not in weakness but in surrender. He taught no students, left behind no writings. The only clue to his thoughts was a single haiku scratched into the cave wall with a sharpened reed. When I am no more, let the wind take my silence and fold it in snow. They found him only by accident. A hunter chasing a wounded deer stumbled across the cave entrance, its mouth overgrown with moss and nettles. When he stepped inside, he saw the monk seated there, his skin like parchment, his robes stiff with salt and time. The deer had escaped, but something else had been found. You picture the hunter running back to the village, breathless, pale, trying to describe what he had seen without using the word ghost. When the monks arrived days later, the body was unchanged, not bloated, not crumbling, not gone. They carried him down in the same reverence as the others. He too rests now in a small shrine tucked in a coastal temple where the sea mists veil the mountain each morning. Visitors speak in whispers there, even if they do not know why. You open your eyes again, this time in the present. The cold is deeper now, or perhaps you've simply become more aware of it. You walk slowly around the outside of the shrine, letting your fingers brush the bark of the trees that surround it. Their skins are rough, weathered by frost and wind, but beneath them pulses the same life that moves through everything. Even the things that seem unmoving. You wonder, why did they do it? Not just to defy death, not just to preserve the body, but to say something beyond words, something that only silence perfect and unbroken could express. You think of the world you came from, the noise, the endless motion, the desperate scramble to matter. These monks did the opposite. They vanished in place, not to be forgotten, but to become memory itself. You close your eyes once more, and this time it is not sleep that comes, but something quieter. You imagine yourself sitting in that same posture, legs folded, hands resting in your lap, spine aligned with the earth's own axis. Not to become stone, not to become sacred, but to feel for just one breath what they must have felt in their final hours. Stillness, full and complete, like the end of a bell's echo, like the snow that falls with no witness. You inhale, you exhale, and for a moment the world does not rush forward. It waits, with you, just as it once waited for them. The sky begins to dim, though it is still early in the afternoon. Up here in the mountains, the sun forgets its duties more quickly than in the towns below. Shadows stretch like long fingers through the cedar trunks. The snow reflects what little light remains, and everything takes on a bluish hue, like memory viewed through frozen glass. You decide to stay one more night. The small temple has no beds, only tatami mats, and a woolen blanket left folded in the corner. You spread it out in front of the monk's dais, the same spot you sat the night before. As dusk settles, you light a single candle and place it on the floor between you. Its flame flickers softly, casting delicate dancing shadows across the contours of the seated figure. For a moment, the shadows seem to breathe. You tell yourself it's the candle, but something deeper stirs. Not fear, not imagination, recognition. You are not the first to sit here. You will not be the last. You think again of the ones who came before, wanderers, monks, travelers, scholars, all drawn to the stillness, all drawn to the impossible. Tonight you choose to remember another. Not one of the known Sokushinbutsu, not one of the preserved, but one who failed, or rather one who chose not to finish. His name was Koji. He was young, too young some said when he announced he would begin the path. But he was determined, almost fierce in his resolve. He fasted, he purified, he drank the sap. His body grew thin, hollowed by ritual, by discipline. Yet something inside him remained restless. They say his eyes never settled. Even during zazen they would twitch beneath his lids like moths caught in a jar. He found his cave far from any temple, deep in the ravines where the mist never lifted and the sun touched nothing. He began his final meditation there in solitude. The villagers left him a bell. For months they heard it ring. One chime, then another, and another. But on the 100th day the bell stopped. Not because he had passed, but because he had changed his mind. He emerged from the cave, barefoot, skeletal eyes hollow like winter wells. He said nothing. He walked to the river and drank deeply. The monks found him days later lying on the riverbank, whispering to the wind. He lived another 5 years, but he never returned to the temple. He built a small hut of driftwood and reeds beside the river, and lived off mossfish and silence. He never again spoke of his attempt, and no one asked. But those who visited him said he carried a stillness within him, different from those who became Sokushinbutsu. It was not the stillness of death, but the stillness of one who had faced eternity and turned back, and found peace anyway. You think of him now as the candle burns lower. His story is never told in the temples. He is not preserved. No shrine holds his name, but you feel him near, in the wind, in the breath between thoughts, in the soft resolve of those who choose life after nearly choosing something else. The candle flickers again. You close your eyes. You imagine Koji sitting beside you, not in robes, not in a shrine, but in his reed hut by the river. His hair long, his hands calloused, his mouth calm. Not smiling, just present. You wonder, did he regret walking away? Or did he discover something on the edge of silence that even the preserved monks never knew? You look again at the Sokushinbutsu before you. He does not answer, but he does not judge either. Stillness, after all, makes room for both. Those who remain, and those who return. You lie back now, your head on folded arms, the blanket warm against the chill that has crept into the room. The candle sputters, the shrine darkens, but your mind does not wander. It stays here, in this place where time folds in on itself, where monks vanish slowly, and the wind carries stories no one tells aloud. You listen, and in that listening you are not alone. Somewhere far off another bell rings, faint, distant, perhaps only in memory, but perhaps not. You drift into sleep, not with a start, not with a jolt, but with a slow dissolve. Like snow melting in a quiet palm, like a name being whispered into fog. Like a monk sitting down in the dark, not to die, but simply to wait. When you wake, the snow has fallen again. The forest outside is hushed, blanketed in a fresh layer of white so pristine that it seems not just untouched, but unimagined, like the world has paused its story for a single breath. You open the shrine door gently, and the air greets you with a stillness so complete it feels almost like sound turned inward. No footsteps. No birds, not even wind. The trees stand motionless, black strokes against the pale sky. The snow rests on their branches with a kind of reverence, as though even nature understands the sacredness of what lies here. You step outside your boots, sinking slightly into the powder, and feel the crisp bite of the air press against your skin like memory returning. You walk a short distance down the slope behind the shrine, and there you find it, a stone marker half buried beneath snow moss growing from the cracks. There is no name, just a simple carving, a lotus with its petals closed. You kneel beside it and brush away the snow, revealing more of the stone. Faint etchings swirl along its edges. Waves, clouds wind symbols more than letters. You place your hand on the cold surface, and for a moment feel a pulse, not of warmth, but of presence. Here lies another, one who was not found in a cave or seated in a box. One who passed long before the preservation process was complete. His name has not been recorded, but the monks remember him. They say he died during the second phase of Sokushinbutsu, after the body had been purified, after the sap had taken its toll, but before the burial had begun. His breath stopped during meditation. Not violently, not unexpectedly. He simply stopped. And though he had not sealed himself into the earth, the other monks honored his effort. They built this marker. They carved the lotus unopened. A symbol of a journey that did not fully bloom yet was no less sacred. You sit beside the stone for a while. The cold seeps into your knees, but you don't move. You think about all the ones whose names are lost. Not the 30 or so Sokushinbutsu mummies that remain in museums and temples, but the many more who began the path and never finished. Some starved too quickly. Some grew ill. Some grew afraid, and others perhaps found what they were looking for before the ritual was complete. You imagine one now. A woman, though women were rarely permitted the monastic path of Sokushinbutsu. Her name was Akane. She lived in secret among the foothill shrines, posing as a servant, sweeping temple floors, cleaning incense bowls, waking before the monks and retiring after them. But she listened, she watched, and she learned. She heard the head priest speak of the body as vessel. She heard the whispered stories of monks who sat until their breath froze inside them. She memorized every herb, every root, every rule. And when the mountain fires burned the lower forest in the spring of her 35th year, she vanished. No one searched. No one noticed. They assumed she had gone home, but she hadn't. She had begun her sitting, high in a cave above the fire line where no temple ever stood. There, with only a clay pot and a prayer cloth, she began her path. No bell, no witnesses, only snow silence and the wind. When a group of loggers stumbled across her shrine 50 years later, they found bones arranged in lotus position, a robe faded to threads, and a single line etched into the wall behind her in kanji so faint they almost missed it. To vanish is not to fail. They left the shrine untouched. They built no monument, but stories spread through the mountain villages. And in one temple far from her cave, a monk began to place a lotus flower beside an unnamed statue every equinox. You remember this as you rise from the stone marker. Your breath floats before you, clouding the air like a thought unspoken. You return to the shrine. Inside, the candle has burned down to a pool of wax. The monk sits exactly as he has always sat. You feel a shift in the space, almost imperceptible. Not a sound, not a breeze, but a change in the weight of your own thoughts. You realize something? None of this was ever about defeating death. Not really. It was about learning to be still within it, to sit so fully, so completely in the present moment that even time forgets to pass. That is the path you've been walking all along, not up a mountain, but inward. You light another candle. You fold your hands in your lap. And for a while, minutes, hours, who can say, you simply breathe. With him, with them, with all the silent ones. The candlelight wavers against the wooden walls, casting long bowed shadows that ripple with each flicker of the flame. The monk does not move, neither do you. For the first time in what feels like days, your thoughts have quieted. Not vanished, but slowed like snow caught mid-fall, suspended in the hush that wraps itself around the mountains. And yet something stirs in you, not a question, not a desire to understand, but a soft thread pulling you again deeper, further back into the roots of this ritual. You close your eyes, and the wind seems to shift. You are no longer in the shrine. You are in a different century, a different body, a different silence. This time it is summer. The trees wear their green like silk robes, and the river runs full with melted snow from the peaks above. You see a village nestled in the foothills, no roads, only footpaths, and smoke drifting gently from the thatched rooftops. Among these homes, in a temple surrounded by wild hydrangeas, a young monk prepares his final bath. His name is Rensho. He is 37, and he has spent the last 6 years purifying himself, not just the body, but the senses, the habits, the longings. He walks barefoot on gravel paths, drinks only pine needle tea, eats the roots that cause the tongue to go numb, and sleeps sitting up to train himself for what lies ahead. He has built his own tomb, a small wooden chamber just wide enough for his cross-legged frame, dug into a dry slope beside a cedar grove. The villagers helped him, though no one spoke of it aloud. They carried stones, they brought wood, and then they waited for the season to turn. Today is the day he enters. You watch him walk barefoot through the village, the hem of his robe dusted with dry earth. Children peek from behind doorframes. Elders bow. No one stops him. No one speaks. At the edge of the grove, he turns one last time to look at the world. Not with longing, not with regret, but with an almost impossible calm. He steps into the chamber. They lower the roof and seal the edges with resin and clay. He is given a small tube of bamboo to breathe through. A bell is placed in his lap. And each morning, for as long as he can, he will ring it once to signal that he is still here. You feel the darkness inside the tomb. You feel the wood pressing against the shoulders, the earth pressing from above. But he does not tremble. He begins to chant, slowly, softly, until the chanting fades into breath, and the breath into silence. Above the ground, the days pass. The villagers rise each morning and listen. A chime, another, until one day there is none. They wait as tradition demands for 1,000 days more. When they finally open the chamber, they find him seated, eyes closed, the faintest impression of a smile resting on lips now dried like autumn leaves. The skin has darkened, but remains whole. The hands are still folded. The bell is still in his lap. They carry him to the temple and enshrine him in the inner hall. And from then on he is no longer called Rensho. He is known only as the monk who returned through stillness. You open your eyes. The shrine is quiet, but something feels fuller now. Not with sound, but with presence. The candle has nearly burned to its base. Its light pools low and golden across the tatami, and you see beside the dais an offering you hadn't noticed before, a small carved box lacquered in faded black, its edges worn smooth by time. You reach toward it, not to open, just to touch. Its surface is cool, but the air around it feels warm, almost pulsing. You draw your hand back. You understand now that this is not a place for taking, only for witnessing. For remembering. The snow has begun again outside, thick flakes spiraling down like ash from a sky on fire. You wrap the blanket around your shoulders and lean against the wooden pillar, eyes half closed, listening not for words, but for the story that breathes in this silence. Because silence here is not emptiness, it is memory, formless but full, still but alive. And as the wind howls once more through the forest beyond the shrine, you realize that this journey, this strange pilgrimage into a world of monks who chose not to be remembered, has left something inside you that you cannot name. A stillness, perhaps, or a reverence, or the knowledge that somewhere in some cave or temple or forest a figure still sits, spine straight, breath ceased but presence undiminished, waiting not to be found, just to be felt. You remain at the shrine longer than you expected. Hours pass in a kind of sacred drift where time no longer ticks but breathes. Every now and then you hear the soft creak of wood, perhaps from the beams adjusting to the cold, or perhaps from something deeper. The presence in the room is no longer just the monks. It is the weight of every life that once chose silence over song, permanence over decay. As evening begins to settle again, a quiet memory rises within you, something faint, something you don't remember ever learning, but now seems planted like an old root unearthed in soft soil. There was once a monk who became Sokushinbutsu, not in Japan, but far away, before the ritual had a name, before there were rules, before there were shrines to house the dead who would not rot. This monk lived at the edge of the Silk Road, in a cave above a caravan trail where traders brought silk, salt, incense, and rumors. He wore no formal robe, no shaved head. He was not trained in any monastery, but the travelers who passed his cave said he sat always in the same posture, legs folded, hands resting in his lap, eyes closed beneath a hood of sun-dried cloth. Some claimed he never moved. Others swore they saw him once blink or lift a hand as they passed. No one ever heard him speak, but everyone who met his gaze said they left changed. Not louder, not wiser, just quieter. When the trade route shifted and the desert swallowed the old path, the cave was forgotten. Centuries passed, until one day a windstorm stripped the sand from a hollow in the cliff, and there he was, still seated, still whole, his skin dark as bronze, his bones undisturbed, his face calm, not preserved by any known technique, only by his own stillness. The archaeologists who found him argued for months. Some claimed he was naturally mummified. Others said he had been embalmed by a forgotten tribe. But one woman, a quiet researcher from Kyoto, simply placed a hand to her heart and whispered, "He sat longer than time." You think of that phrase now, "He sat longer than time," and you feel the truth in it, not in your mind but in your chest. Because all of them, the monks in the caves, the sealed ones, the ones who failed, the ones who were never found, they were not trying to escape time. They were becoming part of it, like stones in a riverbed, like the pulse of the earth beneath frost. You rise slowly from the mat. Your knees protest, your muscles ache, but there is no hurry. The monk remains where he is. He will always remain. You step outside. The snow has grown heavier now, falling in soft veils that blur the outlines of the world. The path down the mountain is no longer visible. Only the treetops show the way. But you do not walk just yet. You listen, not for sound but for feeling. And there it is, faint but steady. That deep hush that lives only in places touched by eternity. You begin to walk slowly, carefully, the snow catching in your eyelashes, your breath rising in clouds that vanish before your eyes. And as you descend, the memories follow you like silent companions. You remember the woman Akane who vanished without ritual. You remember Koji who turned back and found peace by the river. You remember Rensho who smiled in the dark. You remember the cave above the Silk Road and the monk who outlasted memory itself. And you remember the one you left behind in the shrine, still seated, still waiting. You do not know their names, but they know yours. Not the name on your passport or your phone or the one your co-workers call out across a crowded room, but the one inside you. The quiet name, the one that only reveals itself in stillness. As the trees thin and the slope evens out, you glimpse the first lights of the village below. Soft lanterns swinging outside homes, their glow flickering in the snow like forgotten stars. You feel something shift in you. You are not who you were when you climbed. Not because of what you've seen, but because of what you've heard in the silence. You pause at the edge of the woods. One last time you turn and look up toward the mountain. You cannot see the shrine from here, but you feel it. A warmth that has nothing to do with fire. A presence that needs no words. And you realize you did not leave him behind. You carry him now, not as memory, but as breath, as posture, as stillness and motion. You begin walking again, but something in you has stopped and will never move again. The snow thins as you reach the lower village. Lanterns glow with a golden hum, their paper skins trembling in the wind. Smoke curls lazily from the rooftops, curling into the night sky where stars remain hidden behind heavy clouds. The world feels warmer here, closer to life, closer to noise. But something in you remains distant, as if part of you is still walking in silence, still folded in robes, still sitting cross-legged beneath a mountain of snow. You pass a small tea house, its windows fogged with breath and steam. A woman inside laughs softly, pouring tea for an old man whose hands tremble as he lifts the cup. You smile, but you don't stop. Not yet. The warmth of human voices feels too sharp after so much quiet. You're not ready to return to it completely. Instead, you make your way to the small temple at the edge of the village. It's unassuming, just a single bell, a narrow gate, and a garden swept clean despite the falling snow. A priest in a dark gray kimono greets you with a gentle bow. He doesn't ask where you've come from. He already knows. You follow him inside. The temple is dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of incense and old wood. He leads you to a side room where scrolls line the walls, each one brushed in hand-drawn ink. Each line a poem, a record, a name. You pause before one. The characters are simple, sparse, elegant. The priest sees where your eyes land and nods. That one was never found, he says softly. But the dream of him remains. You sit beside the scroll. The room holds no furniture, only tatami mats and silence. He leaves you there without a word, sliding the paper door shut behind him. And again you are alone. But not quite. You let your eyes close. The scent of the incense coils around you like a memory being written backwards. Your body softens. Your breath slows. The stories begin to rise again, unbidden but welcome. There was another monk, one whose story was never written down, not on scrolls, not on stones, not even in the minds of the monks who knew him, because he was a secret. A vow kept between two people. A silence held like a cup of warm tea between trembling fingers. His name is not spoken, but this is what is remembered. He lived in a forest temple where the trees grew so close the sunlight never touched the ground. He was a sculptor, a carver of Buddhas from wood so old it cracked before he touched it. His hands were stained with resin, his robes with sawdust. He never sat in formal zazen. He never memorized the chants. He served the kitchen, swept the paths, carved in silence. But one day after many years he stopped carving. He turned his tools inward. He built a box, not a coffin, a chamber. He left it unsealed in a grove behind the temple. Each night he returned there. He sat inside it for an hour, then 2, then 10, until one day he did not return to the temple at all. They found the box closed, the lid weighted down by a single stone. No bell, no breath, nobody, just a single line etched into the floor beneath where he would have sat. I am not what remains, I am what disappears. The monks never opened the box. They buried it where it sat beneath moss and leaves. And every year since, someone has returned to that grove, not with prayers, not with chants, but with silence. They sit beside the moss. They breathe. They remember. But they do not speak. You open your eyes. The scroll before you shimmers faintly in the candlelight. You run your fingers along its edge, tracing not the characters but the empty space between them. And you understand. The Sokushinbutsu were not trying to escape death. They were practicing presence so deeply, so relentlessly, that even death had to sit down and wait. They did not seek to be remembered. They sought to become memory itself. You rise, bow once to the scroll, and leave the room. Outside, the snow has stopped. The village sleeps. Only the wind remains curling through the eaves, whispering through the branches. But even it sounds quieter now. You walk slowly back through the narrow streets, past the tea house, past the old man still sipping from his cup, now drowsy in the warm light. You walk beyond the edge of the village, where the path turns to earth again, and you find a small shrine, empty, waiting. You kneel, not to pray, not to speak, only to sit, as they did, as they do, as you now understand. Stillness is not absence. Stillness is a presence too vast for words, a presence that asks only one thing, that you stop and listen. The small shrine you found rests beneath a crooked pine tree, its trunk twisted like a body caught mid-turn. Snow gathers gently on the slanted roof, and moss creeps along the stone base like a memory refusing to fade. There are no statues inside, no offerings, just a bare wooden platform, its grain worn smooth by time and weather, and a quiet so deep it feels like an echo of something older than sound. You sit, not to think, not to remember, only to be. The cold no longer bites. It simply is like the earth beneath your legs or the air in your lungs. You watch as your breath fogs and fades over and over, and something within you begins to settle, not like a decision, but like dust finally coming to rest in the corners of a long-forgotten room. You remain like this for a while. Then quietly you feel a story forming in the air around you, not in words but in weight. Another monk story, one you've never read, never heard. But it is here, rising from the silence like steam from hot tea. His name was Shinin. He lived not in a forest cave, but on the edge of a cliff where the land broke into sea. His temple clung to the rocks like a last breath, and from its wooden porch he could see the waves crash below in eternal rhythm. Every morning he greeted the tide with a bow. Every evening he listened to its roar like a lullaby. But what haunted him was not death. It was noise. The world had grown loud, too loud for him. He had tried to meditate in the main hall, but the sound of footsteps always broke through. He had tried the inner shrine, but the rustle of robes and clink of prayer beads made stillness impossible. Even the silence of others had become a noise he could not bear. So he built a room far from the temple. A single square of stone and wood balanced atop a cliff so high that birds would not fly near it. He called it Munoma, the room of nothing. He brought nothing inside. No altar, no scrolls, not even a cushion. He sat on stone and listened to nothing, and waited, not for death, but for disappearance. He did not fast. He did not poison his body. He simply withdrew from the world so completely that his presence began to fade. The monks would see him walking once a month when he fetched a bowl of water from the temple well, but they stopped speaking to him. He had become more absence than man. Years passed. Storms came. Earthquakes shook the coastline. One day a landslide took the room of nothing into the sea. The monks assumed he had gone with it. But weeks later they found a single footprint in the mud near the temple. Still sharp, still wet, as if made that morning. They followed the trail but found no one. Only an empty robe folded beneath the temple bell. To this day, when the wind blows strong across that cliff, the younger monks say they can hear a breath that isn't theirs. Not a ghost, not a warning, just a presence, one that left so gently the world did not notice. You open your eyes. You're still seated in front of the shrine, but something feels different now. Lighter. Like a door has opened somewhere behind your ribs, letting air pass through a room that had long been locked. Stillness has a sound, you realize. It's the hum beneath the wind, the rhythm of your own heart when it no longer races, the quiet behind thought. You bow slightly, not to the shrine, but to the space it holds, and then you rise. The village lights are farther behind you now. The mountain looms ahead again, dark and white and waiting. You walk slowly along the frozen path, and in your mind more stories begin to take shape. Not legends, not myths, but memories that never made it into books. You think of a monk who tried the Sokushinbutsu path and failed, not from fear, not from hunger, but because he fell in love with a bird. A simple brown bird that perched outside his cave each morning and sang. The monk found himself waiting for it. He began to speak to it. He began to save crumbs of his bark dust food for it. And one day when the bird did not come, he felt something crack inside him. Not grief, but attachment. And he knew he could not go forward. He left the cave the next morning carrying only the small straw mat he'd sat on. He returned to the village and lived the rest of his life sweeping temple paths and whistling softly to the trees. You smile at the thought, because stillness is not always the same. For some it is silence in a box beneath the snow. For others it is a quiet heart in the middle of the world. The moon breaks through the clouds now. Its light falls across the forest in silver patches and everything becomes a dreamscape, soft, hushed, barely real. You stop walking. You stand in the center of the path, and you listen. The forest does not speak, but you hear it anyway. Because now you know what to listen for. You remain there standing in the moonlight, your breath fogging softly around you. The forest has become a cathedral, its pillars made of pine, its ceiling a sweep of stars barely breaking through cloud. Everything feels paused, not dead, not asleep, just attentive, as if the trees themselves are listening to your stillness. You begin walking again, but not toward the village. Your feet turn instead toward the higher path, the one that climbs back into the folds of the mountain. The trail is thin and broken, dusted in wind-blown snow, half erased by time, but it calls to you. There is something more waiting up there. Not answers, not revelation, Just another story, another silence. You walk through the night. The trees grow thinner, the air sharper. And as the first light of dawn begins to pull the edges of the sky into pale gray, you find what you didn't know you were seeking. It's not a shrine, not a temple, not a monument. Just a hollow in the earth. A natural indentation in the side of a slope sheltered from wind by the angle of the rock. Someone once lived here. You can feel it in the way the stones are arranged half-circled, deliberate like the boundary of a sitting place. Ashes still cling to a blackened pit in the center. Tiny bones bird rabbit suggests someone cooked here long ago. And on the wall of the rock just above eye level a single handprint, pressed deep into the stone as if it had melted under the pressure of presence. You sit inside the hollow. The ground is cold, but you don't mind. You let your back rest against the rock, your eyes soften, your breath slow. And the story comes gentle and unspoken. This was not a monk. This was a thief, a man exiled from his village for stealing during a famine. He was whipped, banished, left to die in the mountains. But he didn't die. He found this hollow. He made fire. He hunted small animals. He waited for the rage to pass. And when it did, what replaced it was silence. Not the silence of punishment. The silence of beginning. He stopped trying to live like a man. He started to live like stillness. Each day he sat. Not in meditation, not in prayer, just in the quiet. His body wasted. His anger left. His thoughts slowed. He carved nothing. He spoke nothing. But one morning, after years had passed, he pressed his hand into the wall and left it there, as if to say, I was here. But more than that, I became here. You reach out now and place your palm over the faint indentation. It doesn't fit. It's smaller, older, but it welcomes your hand anyway. You close your eyes, and for a moment you feel the presence of someone who was never remembered, never revered, but who found through isolation a form of peace even the monks could not name. You sit like that until the sun finally crests the mountain behind you, casting light into the hollow for the first time all morning. The frost glitters on the grass. The trees shift gently in the warming breeze. And you realize something simple and final. Stillness is not a path. Stillness is the place all paths lead to. The monks in their boxes, the novices in their caves, the sculptor who vanished, the woman who left no bell, the thief who left only a handprint. All of them arrived here, not at this mountain, not in this hollow, but here in the pause between motion, in the breath between thoughts, in the echo that follows surrender. You rise, your knees stiff, your back aching, but your heart lighter than it has felt in years. You look one last time at the handprint. Then you begin your descent. The snow has begun again, soft, steady, unhurried. You do not rush. You match its rhythm. You let it guide your steps. And for the first time since you arrived in these mountains, you are not searching anymore. You are simply walking. You carry no relic, no photograph, no scripture, only the silence they left behind. And it is more than enough. The descent takes longer than you expect. Not because the path is steep or the snow too thick, but because you stop often. Not to rest, but to notice. You pause beneath a tree where icicles hang like ancient teeth. You trace the frozen bark with your fingertips. You kneel beside a stream barely moving beneath its glassy surface and watch the way sunlight dances across the ice. Everything speaks, but nothing interrupts. Your footsteps are the only sound, and even they feel like whispers. By midday, you reach a fork in the path. One trail leads back toward the village, the other into a grove of cedar trees you hadn't noticed before. Something about them calls to you. They are taller than the others, older, their trunks thick and twisted, their needles a darker green. The snow doesn't cling to their branches. It slides off in soft sheets, leaving the limbs bare and slick with frost. You follow this new trail without question. It winds slowly, looping deeper into the woods until the world behind you feels forgotten. The air changes again, thinner, stiller. You begin to sense that you are not alone, not in the way of being watched, but in the way of standing in a room full of sleeping souls. And then you see it. At the base of the largest tree, half concealed by roots that arch over it like the fingers of a buried hand, sits another shrine. Small, weathered, its roof partially collapsed, one side open to the wind. But inside, sitting just as he must have sat a century ago, is a monk, another Sokushinbutsu. You freeze, not in fear, in reverence. He is smaller than the one in the mountain shrine. His robes are darker, more decayed. His hands are curled inward, the bones of his fingers barely visible beneath cracked skin. A prayer bead necklace hangs from his neck, each bead dulled by time, one missing. His face is almost completely gone. Only the curve of the skull remains beneath layers of dried tissue and shadow. And yet, there is no horror, no sorrow, only stillness. The tree behind him has grown around the shrine. The roots form a kind of throne. The trunk leans in as if listening. You feel as though you've stepped not into a forest, but into a sacred hall where the only law is silence. You kneel. The snow is cold beneath your knees, but you barely notice. This monk has no nameplate, no candle, no offerings, no record of his path or his passing. But here he sits, undisturbed, unclaimed, and somehow more present than anything else you've encountered. You wonder who found him. If anyone ever did. Maybe he came here knowing no one would follow. Maybe he wanted it that way. A Sokushinbutsu without a shrine, without a bell, without ceremony. You sit across from him. A part of you wants to speak, to thank him, to ask how he did it. But you say nothing, because this you now understand is his teaching. The absence of explanation, the offering of nothing. And yet everything is here. The snow falling slowly through the hole in the roof. The wind curling around your shoulders. The slow melting of time. You close your eyes and let the world fall away. You are no longer a visitor, no longer a seeker. You are part of the hush. When you finally open your eyes, you don't know how much time has passed. The light has changed again gold, now brushing the snow with the color of old parchment. You bow once deeply, not as a gesture of farewell, but of continuation. Then you rise and leave the shrine just as you found it, untouched, unnoticed by the world. As you step back onto the trail, something catches your eye. Etched faintly into the bark of the tree beside the monk is a single character. You recognize it. Emptiness, but not absence. Rather the space that holds all things. The room inside a bell, the silence between notes, the breath at the end of a life. You trace it once with your finger, then let it go. The trail winds downward again. The snow grows thinner. You hear the first bird call you've heard in days. A single clear note, then nothing. And it feels perfect. You know now that stillness is not confined to shrines or monks or mountains. Stillness is portable. It is the space you carry inside you, the gap between impulse and action. The choice to pause, to breathe, to not fill the silence. You are walking again, but something in you is seated, unmoving, eternal. And from this point on, wherever you go, you will always be a little bit still. The snowfall thickens as you descend, but it no longer feels like a barrier. It feels like a blessing. Each flake lands without sound, softening the world into something weightless and slow. The path winds gently now through groves of cedar and empty fields glazed with frost. You pass a stone lantern tilted slightly to one side, half buried in snow, its fire long since gone out. You wonder who lit it last. You wonder if they ever returned. By the time you reach the edge of the village, night is falling again. The sky is a deep blue bruise and the air smells of firewood and boiling rice. Smoke curls from chimneys in sleepy spirals. Dogs bark somewhere distant. A bell tolls once from the temple, not a call. Not a warning, just a note dropped into the silence like a pebble into a still pond. You stop at the edge of the trees and simply watch. There's a man kneeling beside a well, his breath fogging the air. He pours hot water into a bucket, steam rising as it hits the cold. A woman walks past him, slowly carrying a bundle of straw in her arms. Neither speaks, neither looks up, but their movements hold the same rhythm you've come to recognize, the rhythm of lives lived close to the earth, close to silence. You don't enter the village. Not yet. Instead, you follow the path along its edge until you come upon a familiar bend in the road, the one where the first trail began, the one that led you up the mountain. You pause here beneath the same crooked pine you passed on your first day and feel the change inside you as if it were weather. You remember how it felt to arrive restless, searching, full of questions too loud to name. Now they've fallen away. What remains is quieter. You sit beneath the tree and rest your back against its trunk. The bark is rough, the wind is sharp, but you no longer resist discomfort. You welcome it the same way the monks welcomed the ache of hunger, the bite of cold, the silence that grew heavier with each passing day. You look up at the sky. The stars have returned, not bright, not proud, just quietly present, scattered across the dark like forgotten names. And in their presence another memory arrives, not yours, but offered by the place. A final story. One of a boy, not a monk, not a thief, not a sage, just a boy. Orphaned young, raised by his grandmother in a hut at the foot of the forest. He was never taught the sutras. He never learned calligraphy. But he listened, always listening, to the wind through the trees, to the sound of the river breathing, to the silence of his grandmother when she sat with her eyes closed after meals. She died when he was 12. He buried her himself, wrapping her in cloth and lowering her into the earth beneath the cherry tree. Afterward he didn't cry. He didn't run. He simply sat beneath the same tree and waited. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The villagers stopped looking for him, but a hunter once passed through and saw the boy seated beneath the tree, eyes open, face still, breath barely visible. He didn't speak. He didn't move. But the hunter swore the air around him had changed, as if time had gathered there, not to punish him, but to protect him. Years later, when monks came looking for the source of strange reports of a child who sat like stone who needed no food, they found only a hollow where the tree had been split by lightning, and in its roots a circle of pressed grass, still warm, still soft, but empty. No body, no bones, only a feather and the scent of spring. Some say the boy became a spirit. Others say he walked into the forest and never came back. But a few believe he simply found what others spent lifetimes seeking: stillness, not learned, not earned, but remembered. You think of him now as you sit beneath your own tree. You close your eyes, and you feel him not as a ghost, not as a legend, but as a presence seated just beside you, breathing slowly, barely there. And then, like smoke, even that fades. You stay a while longer. You don't know how long. Time has softened. It no longer keeps you. It walks beside you. Eventually you rise. Not because it is time, but because you are ready. You turn toward the village lights. You begin walking, and you do not say goodbye, because silence does not end. It only changes shape. You wake before the light. The sky outside the paper screen is still the deep violet of dreams not yet ended. The air has grown colder overnight, but you do not shiver. You sit up slowly, your body heavy but not tired. It's the weight of something absorbed, like stone after rain. The inn remains silent. The woman from last night has not stirred. No footsteps, no clink of bowls. Only the faint sigh of the coals settling into their last sleep. You rise and fold the blanket neatly, place the cushion back where it was, and step outside barefoot, the floor cool beneath your soles. The wind greets you gently, brushing your face like a memory. And then you walk out of the village, past the last gate, down a path that follows no trail. You are not returning to any of the shrines. You are not seeking another story. You are simply moving with what remains in you. And as you walk, the dawn begins to bleed slowly into the world, first a faint silver outlining the hills, then streaks of blue and gold above the treetops. The frost along the ground begins to glisten, and the tips of grasses catch fire with the first light. You reach a clearing, empty, unmarked, but familiar in its shape. There are no footprints here, no signs of others, but it feels full, the way a room still hums after music has stopped. You sit down on the bare earth. You don't prepare. You don't adjust your posture. You simply sit, as you are. As they did, you close your eyes, and this time no story rises. No vision, no ancient monk waiting to be heard. There is only breath, yours, and the one you've been following. The great breath beneath all things. You let it hold you. Let it shape the silence around your spine. Let it move through your ribs like wind through pine needles. You lose track of time. The light shifts. Birds begin to speak again, not with songs, but with single notes spaced far apart like punctuation in a long, quiet sentence. And then you hear footsteps, soft, measured. You don't open your eyes, but you feel the presence as it settles beside you. Someone else has come. You don't know who. You don't need to. They don't speak. They don't even seem to breathe. They simply join you. And in that joining, the stillness grows. Not heavier, just wider, as if the clearing has expanded to hold you both. And then another, and another. One by one, without sound, without arrival, the presence of others gathers. It is not a crowd. It is not a vision. It is a remembering of all who have ever sat, who have ever paused, who have ever disappeared into silence and returned not as names but as echoes. You feel them not around you but within you. You are the cave. You are the bell. You are the stone that did not crack. You are the boy who did not cry. You are the handprint in the wall. You are the empty robe folded beneath the temple steps. And in that moment you are also yourself. Completely. You open your eyes. The clearing is still empty. No one beside you. No footprints. No breath but yours. But your chest holds more air than it ever has. And your stillness feels not like an end but like a beginning. You rise. The sun has fully lifted now. The sky burns with gold and pale blue. You bow once, not to anything visible but to everything you now know is there. And you begin walking again. But this time the world moves with you. Each step you take is wrapped in silence. Not the silence of absence, but of presence so full, so whole it has no need to speak. You return to the path, to the village, to the tea and the fire and the woman who will smile without asking where you've been. You return to the world not to leave the stillness behind, but to carry it everywhere. In how you sit, how you listen, how you touch the world with fingers gentler than before. The monks who froze themselves did not do so to escape life. They did it to show the shape of stillness, to leave behind not instructions, but reminders. And now you are one of them, not a statue, not a ritual, but a presence, a breath, a space where the world can rest, just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it forgot. That silence is never empty. It is full, and waiting, always waiting. The silence follows you now not as a shadow, but as a second spine. You feel it in your back as you walk, in your breath as it moves through your chest, in the spaces between your steps where the snow no longer crunches but yields. You do not walk quickly. There is no longer anything to hurry toward. The village reappears slowly, not because the path is long, but because the boundary between the mountain and the world has grown thin. Trees part. Fences return. The faint smell of smoke drifts again through the air, carrying traces of cedar and rice and the faintest sweetness of persimmon peel. When you step back into the village square, a few people glance up. Not out of curiosity, not surprise, just the way one might acknowledge wind brushing past their shoulder. You nod. They nod. No words are exchanged, and none are needed. You return to the inn, the same room, the same mat, the same scroll of the crane now trembling ever so slightly in the morning breeze leaking through the door frame. But something is different. You've brought the forest inside you, and now even this room breathes slower. You rest for a time. Not sleep, not meditation, just rest. And as your body sinks into the mat, another memory emerges, not from the mountain, not from your walk, but from something older, buried in the marrow, inherited perhaps. A monk once said nothing for 40 years. Not a vow of silence, not a protest. He simply had no more need to speak. He tended a garden behind a temple at the edge of the sea. No shrine bore his name, no scroll preserved his image. He grew cabbages, cleaned stones, sat in the sun. And people came, not to learn from him, but to sit near him, because near him things slowed. Birds landed closer. Leaves fell more gently. Fishermen said their knots untangled themselves after walking past his gate. One day during a storm, a young monk was sent to check on him. The roof had caved in. The garden was flooded. But the old man was sitting, as always, soaked to the bone, smiling faintly. A single frog rested on his knee. He did not speak, but the boy sat with him anyway. And when the storm ended, the boy rose and never spoke again either. Not because he was told to, because he had learned. Some truths do not require translation. Some peace cannot survive explanation. You think of this now, as you rise and walk once more, this time, not toward a shrine or a memory, but toward the old temple at the edge of the village. The bell tower looms above the roofs, its curved tiles glistening with meltwater. You pass through the wooden gate, past the koi pond now frozen, up the stone steps dusted with frost. Inside, the main hall is empty. A single monk kneels before the altar, brushing ash from the incense bowl. He does not turn. He knows you are there. You sit at the far edge of the room. You do not speak. You do not bow. You simply join the silence. And after a while you realize something that catches you off guard. You're smiling. Not with your mouth, not with your face, but somewhere inside. The kind of smile that only stillness recognizes. The monk rises, places the brush down, and without looking at you, he speaks not in greeting, not in farewell, but in the tone of someone who has known you longer than you've known yourself. There's nothing left to find. You nod, and then he adds, which is why you will always carry it. You don't ask what he means. You already know. You stand. You bow not to him but to the moment, to the silence, to the breath that has walked beside you since the first snow. Outside, the sky is clear. And as you step out of the temple and into the day, the world greets you not with fanfare, but with calm. A broom sweeping a porch. A dog chasing its shadow across the frost. A child placing her hand in her grandmother's palm. And you feel it again. Not the silence itself, but the space it made, the shape it left in you. And in that space, everything now fits. Even noise, even change, even the life you once thought you had to escape to find peace. You walk back to the inn one last time. The woman waits with tea already poured. She says nothing, only places the bowl in front of you, then sits beside her fire. You take the first sip. The warmth moves through you in waves, and you realize stillness isn't a mountain. Stillness isn't a cave. Stillness isn't a body preserved by snow or silence or roots. Stillness is a return. To the moment. To the breath. To the quiet that waits beneath the noise. It was never something you had to go find. It was something waiting for you to remember. And now that you have, it will never leave. You finish the tea. Its warmth stays with you long after the bowl is empty. The woman beside the fire doesn't move, but she nods once as if she's known all along that you would arrive at this moment. You bow your head in quiet thanks not only to her, but to everything, this room, this journey, the silence that took you in and gently returned you. There is no ceremony for leaving, no farewell. You step out into the morning as the sun breaks through the thinning clouds. A few villagers sweep their doorways. One child carries a basket of snow like its treasure. A stray dog follows you for a few steps, then loses interest and wanders off toward the temple. The village grows smaller behind you. The road winds forward, and though you walk alone, you feel surrounded by stillness, by breath, by the monks who never left even in death. Their stories walk beside you now, not as burdens, not as echoes, but as companions. You remember the one who folded into a tree, the one who vanished beneath the sand, the one who left only a robe and a footprint. They were never trying to escape. They were never trying to become sacred. They were simply remembering the one thing the world forgets again and again. That peace cannot be chased, only welcomed. You follow a narrow path along a frozen river. Its surface is smooth, glassy dark beneath the frost. You pause to watch a single leaf skitter across the ice, blown by the wind. It doesn't resist. It dances, spins, and finally settles in a small pocket of snow at the edge. You smile. It feels like a teaching, one you don't need to explain. You walk on, past thickets of bamboo clacking gently in the wind, past fox tracks crisscrossing in the snow, past a small shrine tucked into the base of a tree with a cup of tea left frozen beside it, an offering now wrapped in ice waiting for spring. By midday the trees thin. The road broadens. You can see the distant rooftops of a larger town, plumes of smoke, rising flags fluttering faintly in the wind carts, creaking slowly along narrow lanes. The noise is not loud, but it's there. A soft hum building at the edges of the day. You pause, not in hesitation, just in recognition. You're returning now, to people, to voices, to names, and you carry something with you that cannot be seen, but cannot be hidden either. The stillness walks with you, like a shadow made of breath, like a robe stitched from silence. You reach the edge of the town. Vendors call softly from behind their stalls. Children run between carts, chasing each other with handfuls of snow. A monk from a distant temple chants from a bell tower, his voice thin but clear. You pass through it all like wind through fabric, present but not tangled. A woman selling oranges offers you one. You bow. She smiles. No words, just exchange. The stillness between two people who understand that sometimes a gesture is enough. You take the fruit with both hands. Its skin is cool, dimpled, fragrant. You carry it in your palm as you continue walking, toward no destination in particular, just forward. And that's when you see it. A small wooden sign at the edge of a quiet lane, hand-painted, faded with age. It reads, "Room of Stillness available." There is no further explanation, no arrow, no door, just the words. You stop, you look up, and on a whim you follow the lane. It winds past a row of narrow houses, their gardens sleeping under snow. And at the end, set slightly back, its gate ajar, is a house. Simple, unassuming, but you know it. Not because you've seen it before, but because it feels like it waited for you. You enter. Inside there is no one. No sound. Just a room. Empty. Sunlight spills through the window. A cushion rests in the center of the floor. No altar. No statue. Just space. You sit, not to begin again, but to continue. You peel the orange slowly. Its scent fills the room like incense. You eat in silence, one section at a time, and with each bite the world settles a little more. This room will not be famous. No one will come here to remember you. But the stillness knows, and that is enough. You breathe in, and for the first time it feels like home. You stay in the room of stillness for several days, or maybe it's only a single afternoon stretched thin by silence. Time no longer measures itself here in hours or meals or footsteps. It moves more like breath, slow, cyclical, always returning. You sleep lightly, wake without confusion. The orange peel dries in a neat curl beside the cushion. No one knocks, no one asks. The world outside continues. You can hear it faintly, the crack of carts over frozen mud, the calls of merchants, the rustle of fabric in doorways. But it's as if you've passed into a thinner layer of sound, one step removed from the rhythm of the day. You are not cut off, only listening differently now. You sweep the floor once each morning. Not out of obligation, out of reverence. You open the window when the frost melts, letting in air heavy with wood smoke and distant bells. You drink hot water with nothing in it. You sit, and the stories continue to find you. One morning as the light shifts across the floor, you remember another monk. He lived not in a mountain cave, but in the heart of a city. His temple stood on a narrow street, pressed between a fish market and a tea house. Noise was constant, children shouting, dogs barking, vendors singing prices into the wind. And yet every day the monk sat, right in the center of it all, cross-legged on the wooden threshold, facing the street, eyes open, mouth closed. Some mocked him, others ignored him, but over time people began to pause. They would stop mid-step and realize their voices had grown louder near him. They would lower their tone, speak more slowly. Some left coins, others left questions scribbled on scraps of cloth. He never replied, never moved. But the city began to shift, just slightly. Vendors began waiting for each other to finish speaking. Children laughed more softly. Even the dogs barked in rhythm. And though no one built him a shrine when he died, though his name faded like the paint on his temple gate, the street where he sat is still quieter than the others. To this day, you remember him now not to imitate but to honor, because he reminds you that stillness does not need solitude. It can live in the center of motion. You sip your hot water and think about leaving. But the thought does not bring urgency, only clarity. Stillness is not meant to be kept in rooms. It is meant to walk, to move through the world like smoke through cloth. You step outside that afternoon and begin wandering the narrow lanes. No destination, only presence. And as you walk, you begin to notice how different the world feels now. The sound of wind on tile roofs, the weight of footsteps across wooden bridges, the way conversations pause when you pass not out of discomfort but recognition. You are not invisible. You are simply not separate. You belong to the silence now, and it walks beside you. At a stall near the edge of town, a man selling charcoal offers you a place by his fire. You accept. You sit. He says nothing. Neither do you. But after a while, he places a piece of roasted sweet potato in your hand. You eat together, not as strangers, as two presences sharing warmth. You thank him with a bow. He returns it with a smile that needs no translation. Later, in a different part of town, you pass a schoolyard where children are gathered around a stone. One girl waves you over. She points to the rock. It is carved, faintly, a circle. No name, no characters, just the shape. The others are puzzled by it. They ask what it means. You do not answer. But you sit beside them, and after a while they stop asking. They sit too, and the afternoon grows quieter. When you rise to leave, one boy carves another circle into the dirt beside the first. And that is enough. You walk on, toward a new edge of town. A field where kites fly, a path that bends back toward the hills, a road leading nowhere the map remembers. But it remembers you, because now every place you go you bring something unseen, a stillness, not heroic, not holy, just a hush that settles into the soil wherever you step. You walk into twilight, the town behind you, the horizon ahead, and nothing you carry weighs anything at all. Only presence, only breath, only this moment, and the next, and the next. The road before you stretches without urgency. It doesn't demand to be walked, only welcomed. The sun sinks behind the distant trees and the light changes from clear to golden, from golden to blue. You walk until even the sky seems to hush. No destination guides your steps now. You walk not to arrive, you walk to continue. Ahead, a hill rises gently from the fields. Its back is curved like a sleeping ox covered in tall grass, brittle with frost. At the top, an old pavilion stands, a wooden skeleton with no roof, only 4 pillars and a single bench. You climb toward it, feeling the stillness deepen with each step. The wind brushes against you like an old friend returning without fanfare. When you reach the top, the world opens. Below, a patchwork of rice paddies long since harvested, glinting silver where water hasn't yet frozen. Beyond, the shape of a mountain you once climbed, now softened by memory. Above, a sky turning violet, then indigo, then velvet. You sit on the bench. The wood is cracked and cold, but it holds you. The air is sharper now, but clean. Your breath clouds, then disappears. You watch it vanish without sorrow. It reminds you of all the things you once tried to hold. Thoughts, plans, certainty. Now they rise and dissolve like steam from a cup left too long untouched. You feel something inside you loosen an old knot so long carried it had become invisible. But tonight in this quiet it slips free. You are not here to understand. You are not here to change. You are here to stop trying. A bird lands on the edge of the post beside you. It tilts its head, unafraid, then flies away. And you realize that's how your silence feels now. Not a cage, not even a practice, just flight. You stay on the hill as night fully arrives. The stars come slowly like shy travelers. No constellations assert themselves, just scattered lights, soft and patient, pulsing quietly. The town below is lit now, but from this distance its noise can't reach you. Only the memory of fire, only the smell of pine, only the hush of winter walking through grass. You lie back on the bench. Your body settles into its weight. You are not a seeker anymore. You are the place being sought. You close your eyes, and in the deep dark behind them another image begins to rise. Not a story, not a teaching, just a face, weathered, smiling, not quite yours, but not separate. It's the face of a monk who never finished his path, who never reached enlightenment, who never sat beneath a Bodhi tree. He spent his life sweeping temple stones and boiling barley, and when he died no one built a statue, no one chanted his name. But a child who had once seen him picking up a fallen moth from the floor grew up to become a teacher. And that teacher once bowed to a bowl of rice as if it were a god. And a student watching him began to walk more slowly. And someone watching that student found they could no longer raise their voice in anger without hearing the broom sweep behind them. You see that monk now? He never knew he left anything behind, but he left everything. You breathe in, you breathe out. You understand now that stillness doesn't need a witness. Stillness witnesses you, and in doing so becomes a part of you. The stars pulse gently. The cold deepens, but you are not lonely. You are full, as if every silence you've ever carried has finally been returned. Not as answers, not as wisdom, but as peace. You rise before dawn. The grass crunches beneath your feet. Your breath swirls into the morning dark. And as the first light touches the edges of the hills, you begin to walk again. Not away from the stillness, but with it. Always with it. Dawn unfolds slowly as you descend the hill. The sky is pale and empty, a blank scroll, before the ink of day is written. Mist clings low to the fields, curling around tree trunks and drifting across your path in long, ribboned sighs. Your feet move without thought. The frost crunches gently beneath your steps, but even that sound feels softened, absorbed by the hush that now walks with you like a second shadow. You pass a broken fence. A scarecrow stands there, half collapsed, its straw guts spilling from a torn robe. One sleeve flutters in the breeze, and for a moment it almost seems to bow. You pause and bow back. Not as ritual, not as metaphor, just as greeting. Everywhere you go now, the world meets you in silence. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You pass through a small orchard. Bare trees reach up like fingers asking nothing. In the middle of them, a stone basin filled with frozen rainwater catches your eye. Someone has left a single plum on the edge, shriveled red-black, untouched. You sit beside it and wait, though you don't know for what. Then from between the trees a fox appears. Its steps are cautious but not fearful. It approaches the plum, sniffs once, then looks at you. Its eyes are amber. Clear, unhurried. For a long moment the two of you simply exist in the same space. No motion, no meaning, just presence. Then it turns and disappears without a sound. You smile. You leave the plum untouched and rise again. By midday the path turns rocky and climbs gently upward. You follow it through a narrow gorge where the sun never quite reaches the ground. Here, moss grows in thick green coats, softening the stones, drinking the damp. Water drips from unseen springs overhead. The air is cool and close. You feel as though you are walking through a long exhale. When you emerge from the gorge, the land opens suddenly. A wide field ringed by cedar and cypress. In the center, a large flat stone half covered in fallen needles. You walk to it and brush the stone clean with your sleeve. Beneath the debris, a carving reveals itself, faint, worn by weather and time. A lotus barely visible now. No words, no names, only the shape. You sit beside it and listen, not for a sound, but for what the silence holds, and you begin to feel something rising, not a story, not a voice, but a memory that isn't yours. A monk once came here, long ago. He was old, his steps unsure, but his breath was steady. He had walked for 3 days without stopping. He left no note behind. No companion, no bell, only a trail of prayer beads dropped one by one behind him. Each bead carried a single word carved small and imperfect. Stillness, stillness, stillness. He reached this stone, he sat beside it, and he waited. Not for death, not for vision, just for the earth to remember him. And it did. The trees grew around him but did not touch him. The birds circled but did not land. And when he vanished, only the lotus remained. Not carved by his hand, but pressed into the stone by his presence. You rest your palm against the lotus now. It is cool, solid, and yet it seems to pulse beneath your skin. You close your eyes, and you whisper a word not aloud but within. Stillness, and it answers, not in language, but in quiet that deepens. You stay until the light begins to shift, until the gold grows longer, until the shadows stretch out like threads being pulled toward night. Then you rise, you bow, and you walk on. The road now leads through old farmland terraced fields that haven't been worked in decades. Trees have grown through their borders. Stones are cracked, but the pattern of labor remains. The memory of cultivation lives in the earth like a song once sung over and over. You pause by one such terrace and sit on a low wall. You reach into your pack and remove the last of your food-dried chestnuts wrapped in a scrap of cloth. You eat slowly, without hunger. You chew as if remembering, as if tasting something older than flavor. And when you're done, you place the cloth beneath a stone and walk on. By the time night returns, you've found shelter beneath a rocky outcrop overlooking a wide frozen lake. The moon reflects dimly on the surface. No ripples, no movement. Only light resting on stillness. You lie down beneath the stars. The stone beneath you is cold, but you welcome it. You breathe. In, out, and again. Each breath a thread, each thread a weaving. And what you weave now is not a story, not a conclusion, but a place. A space within the world where stillness lives. You wake to pale light filtering through the folds of stone. The lake before you is still frozen, but the air has changed. A softness moves through it, now subtle but present. Somewhere far off a bird sings a note so thin it nearly vanishes as it leaves its throat. But you hear it, you feel it, like the first line in a scroll yet to be written. You sit up slowly, brushing frost from your shoulders. no stiffness, no resistance. Your body moves with the rhythm of the morning as if it remembers something the mind hasn't caught up to yet. The lake lies unbroken, the ice uncracked. You stare into its surface and see no reflection, only the wide sky and a scattering of old reeds frozen in place, bending slightly in the wind. For a long while you watch nothing happen. And it's enough. You rise and continue. The path that finds you is not marked. No signs, no stones piled in signal. Just the way the grass bends slightly, or the way your feet seem to know where to go. It leads through a thin forest of young trees, bare, bony, reaching. Their roots tangle like questions you no longer need to ask. You step over them carefully, not out of fear, but courtesy. Everything deserves its place now. A stream appears, narrow, mostly frozen but murmuring beneath the crust of ice. You crouch and place your hand against the surface. It hums, low and constant, like the breath of something sleeping but not unaware. You follow it. The stream widens and leads you to a small cabin, weathered, leaning, barely standing. Its roof has partially collapsed. One wall is missing entirely, but inside someone once lived. You see traces of their presence: a shelf carved from driftwood, an old sandal tucked beneath a bench, a cooking pot cracked and blackened. But most of all, a mat in the corner, worn thin, threadbare, pressed into the floor in the unmistakable shape of someone who sat, day after day, year after year, not hiding, not renouncing, just being. You sit beside the impression, not on it. You leave that space as it is, sacred not because of what it contains, but because of what it no longer tries to hold. Above the mat, on the beam of the wall, a line has been carved. Here I left nothing behind, and so I was not taken. You run your fingers across the words. They are shallow, faint, but real. You stay in the cabin until the sun reaches its peak. You warm your hands by placing them on the floorboard, still lit by light. You don't need a fire. You don't need food. You need only this. And when the light begins to slip again westward, golden slow, you rise and walk on. The forest begins to thin. You reach a ridge that overlooks a narrow valley. A few thatched roofs below, smoke curling from one chimney. You descend, not to return, not to announce anything, just to arrive. A young girl sits on a fence watching you approach. She doesn't run. She doesn't wave. She just looks. You bow slightly. She bows back. She holds a plum in her hand, bright red, perfect against her dark coat. She holds it out to you. You take it with both hands. You say nothing, but something passes between you, and she smiles, then hops down and runs back toward the house, leaving you with the fruit. You stand at the edge of the field and peel it with your fingers. The skin comes off in a single slow curl. You take a bite. It's cold, sweet, sharp. You close your eyes, and the taste carries you somewhere beyond words. To snow, to fire, to bells that no longer ring, to monks who do not move, to caves and roots and frozen streams, and most of all, back to yourself. You finish the plum and place the seed gently on a stone. Then you walk again, not forward, not back, but simply onward, carrying nothing, leaving less. But within you now a garden grows, planted in stillness, watered by breath, and waiting for no one. The road out of the valley is a winding thread between quiet hills. You follow it as if it's breathing. Each bend is a breath in, each long slope a breath out. There are no signs, no milestones, no markers of progress. Just the feeling of being moved along, not by purpose but by presence. The wind picks up. It carries with it the dry scent of straw, of wood smoke, and something else, distant incense, faint but unmistakable, drifting from a shrine you haven't yet seen. Your feet adjust, slightly shifting direction without command. You arrive at the source just as the sun dips low. It's a small altar beneath a cedar tree built from stone and moss and time. 3 candles burn, protected by a roof of pine bark and prayer papers pinned with rusted nails. No monks stand guard, no gate surrounds it. It simply exists, tucked into the slope like something the mountain exhaled long ago and then forgot. You kneel. There is no one to watch, no ritual to follow. You bow, once hands resting on your thighs, and remain like that until the wind circles the altar and rises again into the trees. You rise and notice the faintest path behind the cedar, little more than compressed leaves and occasional footprints faded to memory. You follow. The trail climbs steeply and opens onto a high ridge, and there, unexpected, silent and whole, is a field of stones. Hundreds of them, arranged in rows, irregular but not chaotic, each about the size of a child's backpack, each one flat on top, weathered and dark with lichen. Some are marked with lines, others with circles, most with nothing. No names, no dates, only silence. You understand what this is without needing to ask. These are not gravestones. These are remembrances. Of monks who never finished, of pilgrims who vanished, of seekers who sat down and never stood again. Each stone placed by someone who didn't come to mourn but to acknowledge. You walk between them slowly. Your fingers graze their surfaces. They are warm in places, cold in others. Some feel smooth, others like skin split by wind. You stop at one with a single indentation on top, small, round, shallow. A cup once rested there, a cup that held nothing. You sit beside it, and you stay, until the stars appear, until the temperature drops and your breath thickens, until the candles far below have gone out and even the wind seems reluctant to stir. And then in the stillness, something arises in you, not a thought, not a word, but an image. You, much older, sitting, not in a shrine, not on a mountain, but in a simple room, a wooden bowl in your hands, a candle flickering beside your feet, and someone, perhaps a child, watching you from the doorway. You don't speak to them. You don't need to, but they feel it. The silence you've carried all this way. It passes to them, not like a teaching, but like breath. A moment later, the image fades. You rise from the stone. You look around the field one last time, and then slowly you bow. Not to the monks, not to the memory, but to the silence that made it all possible. You descend in darkness. The trail is harder to follow now, but your feet know it. They have learned to listen. You reach the tree altar again and leave a single pine needle on the stones. Nothing else. You sleep beneath that tree, curled like a question, no longer needing an answer. And when you wake, you begin again. Walking, breathing, being. There are no more revelations waiting. No final truths to gather. Only this: that stillness was never a destination. It was the path, the companion, the silence beneath your name. And now, it is you, Dot. The trail winds lower now, following the shape of the mountain as it exhales into the open plains. You walk with ease, as if the weight of all your days has thinned to mist. Below in the valley you see rice fields flooded with light. The water catches the morning like polished metal. A crane stands alone at the edge, unmoving, its shadow resting long beside it. You walk past it without disturbing its pose. You've become familiar with such stillness now, not as performance, not as endurance, but as a kind of presence that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Everything you pass seems to recognize it in you. Even the wind pulls more softly at your robes. Farther down the path you reach a fork. One path leads toward another town, the edge of which you can see blinking with lanterns and faint traces of music. The other veers into the woods, narrow, curved, and mostly hidden beneath an arch of old trees. You turn without thought. The forest closes around you again, not like a trap, like a memory, a gate made of green. The deeper you go, the quieter it becomes. Your footsteps are muffled by old leaves and moss. The smell of cedar and soil grows stronger. And then, through a break in the branches, you find it. A clearing, circular, perfect. In its center sits a stone platform, half swallowed by the earth, its edges rounded with time. You step into the space and feel it immediately. This is not a place for ceremony. It is a place where ceremony has already happened, over and over, without witnesses. You approach the stone and see that someone once carved into it, not with precision, but with care. The grooves are deep and uneven, and the message isn't written in words. It's a spiral, just that, a single line coiling inward. You run your fingers along it. It narrows and narrows, then disappears into a single smooth point. You understand. This is the path you've walked. Not from one place to another, but from wide noise to tight stillness. From asking everything to asking nothing. From the world to the self. From the self to breath. And from breath to nothing at all. You sit at the center of the spiral. You close your eyes. You do not search for any more monks, any more names, any more ghosts. You do not seek a final story. You allow yourself to simply be here. And that is when the last story comes. Not as a vision, but as memory that feels like it has lived inside you all along. There was once a monk who never spoke of stillness. Never taught it. Never tried to preserve it. He lived in a village where people died young and winters were cruel. Every morning he woke before the sun. He chopped wood, carried water, cooked barley, fed the sick. He knelt beside dying farmers and held their hands without prayer. He swept the paths with such care that birds would land behind him and follow the broom. Children would laugh in his presence, not because he smiled, but because the air around him made them feel like they didn't need to be anything else. When he grew old, they offered to build him a new home. He refused. He asked only for a patch of grass behind the temple. He slept there, through storms, through snow, through the long hot silence of summer. And one night he died, sitting up, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees like bowls that had given everything. The villagers buried him beneath the same patch of grass. They marked the place with nothing. But every spring the ground there thaws first. The grass grows a little greener. Children play there longer. And someone always leaves behind a pine cone or a feather or a stone without knowing why. You open your eyes. The spiral is still beneath your hand. The clearing still breathes around you, but something in you has shifted for the final time. The spiral has closed, not as an ending, but as a return. You rise, step slowly out of the clearing. The forest opens again, and the light filters through like memory turning into morning. You descend from the forest like mist rolling off the branches. The ground beneath you is soft again, the earth no longer frozen, the breath of spring rising in pulses beneath your steps. Somewhere behind you, the spiral sleeps beneath a canopy of branches. Ahead, the path leads you to a village so small it barely seems real. It's more a handful of homes than a place. Roofs with broken tiles, lanterns swaying from trees instead of hooks, and silence, not the heavy silence of abandonment, but a living kind of quiet like a hush held between old friends. You step through the edge of it and are greeted not with words but with glances. One or two heads nod as you pass. A child, barefooted and red-cheeked, peeks at you from behind a fence, then disappears again with a giggle. You smile without meaning to. It's enough. At the center of the village is a wooden hall. Not a temple, not quite a house, something in between. Its walls are lined with shelves, and those shelves are filled with bowls. Not matching ones, not sacred. Just bowls of every size, color, material. Some chipped, some polished. Each one clearly once held something meaningful. You pause at the threshold, uncertain if you should enter. But then an old woman appears from the side, her hair white as moth wings, her back curved like a question long carried. She looks at you and simply says, "Choose one." Her voice is rough like wind through dry reeds, but not unkind. You step forward. You pass row after row of bowls, some carved from wood grain patterns like old maps, some made of black stone, smooth and cool like riverbeds. A few are porcelain, painted with the soft blue of ocean dreams. And then you find it, a bowl made from glass but clouded and cracked as if it once held heat too great for its shape. You lift it. The weight is uneven, but it feels right in your hands. You turn. The old woman nods. Outside, she leads you to a bench beneath a willow tree. She sits. You sit beside her. Neither of you speaks. You place the bowl between you on the bench. It catches a bit of the sunlight and throws a tired rainbow across her sleeve. She doesn't look at it. She only says, "You've come far." You nod. "You won't stay." You nod again. "You'll carry something instead." She reaches into the folds of her coat and draws out a small packet wrapped in rice paper. It's no bigger than your palm. She places it gently into the bowl. You glance at her. She only says, "For the return." Then she stands, walks back toward the hall, and vanishes inside. You don't follow. You hold the bowl in both hands, rise, and begin walking again. There is no destination now, only direction. You pass through the village. The people don't ask where you're going. They don't stop you, but they notice. And some of them smile. A dog barks once and then settles. An old man, sweeping dust from a step, pauses just long enough to tap his broom twice against the stones in acknowledgement. You leave the village. You return to the road. But it's not the same road, not because the stones are different, not because the path has changed, but because you are carrying the bowl, and in carrying it you've become someone who carries. The path no longer asks for you to arrive. It only asks that you walk. You pass through an orchard blooming with white flowers. They fall in slow spirals. One lands in the bowl. You let it stay. You pass a stream where children are catching frogs. One of them waves. You wave back. The bowl remains steady. At night you sleep beside a fallen tree and rest the bowl beside you as if it were the heart you once tried so hard to quiet. In the morning you find dew gathered inside it. And when you drink, the water tastes of stone, of stars, of something older than thirst. You do not know what waits ahead. You no longer wonder. All you know is that the stillness is not behind you. It is not something you found and left. It is with you now, pooled inside the bowl, settled into your bones, cradled in your breath. And though no one else may ever ask, ever know, ever see, you have joined them. The monks, the sculptors, the thieves, the watchers, the wanderers. You have joined the story that lives beyond words, the one that begins after names and ends in silence. The road you follow now is no longer marked on maps. It winds between fields left fallow under trees that lean like they're listening past shrines so forgotten their offerings have turned to dust. There are no signs, no milestones, only moments, and each moment somehow feels like its own kind of arrival. You pass an old gate split down the center, vines growing through its iron spine. On the other side, a small path leads into a grove of trees bowed in permanent prayer. You don't mean to step off the road, but your feet move anyway. There's a rhythm now to how you walk, not just the motion of limbs but the softness of gaze, the readiness to see what you would once have passed by. And because of that, you notice it. A bell, not hanging, not mounted, just resting in the grass. It's small, barely the size of a bowl, and covered in rust so deep it looks like a bruise. but the shape is unmistakable. A meditation bell, the kind once struck to call monks from silence into silence again. You kneel beside it. There's no rope, no striker. But you reach out, lift it gently, and hold it in your hands. It's cold, heavy, still. You wonder how long it has lain here, forgotten by the path swallowed by time. You don't ring it. You don't need to. The silence it holds is already pouring through your fingers. You place it in your satchel beside the bowl. And you continue. The sun rises higher. The day warms. But inside you the stillness holds. You stop in the shadow of a broken torii gate, its wood hollowed by years of snow and sun. Behind it a clearing stretches wide, and in its center stands a tree. Tall, straight, alone. Its bark is split by lightning, charred down one side, but it still lives, still blooms. On its highest branches the first blossoms of spring are just beginning to open white against the black. You sit at its base. You place the bowl beside you. You place the bell in your lap. And you breathe. Nothing needs to happen. No wisdom needs to rise. No vision needs to appear. You are not the end of a journey. You are not the culmination of their teachings. You are simply here, and for the first time truly here, in the quiet, in the breath, in the pause. You close your eyes. And in the darkness behind your eyelids, you see them. Not as visions, not as ghosts, but as shapes of silence. The monk in the cedar box, the novice beneath the snow, the sculptor whose hands never finished, the woman who wrapped herself in bells, the thief with the handprint, the old woman with her bowl. They are not names, they are not stories, they are simply the stillness. And now so are you, not frozen, not gone, but melted into the moment. You stay like that until the light begins to fade. And as the shadows stretch long across the field, you lift the bowl once more. You lift the bell. And you begin the return. But the return is not what it once would have been. It's not a going back. It's not a going forward. It is simply continuing. Step by step. Breath by breath. The road does not narrow. It does not end. It simply unfolds. And you unfold with it. By the time the mountains are far behind you, you no longer measure distance in steps. You measure it in stillness. In moments where the world goes quiet. In pauses between heartbeats, in the sound of birdsong before it begins. You enter a village, a different one, this one full of life and sound. Children laugh, bells ring, smoke rises from stoves, and no one knows where you've been. No one asks, but an old man sees the bowl, he sees the bell, and he nods. He does not speak. He only points to a bench in the sun. You sit. You place the bowl on your knees. You place the bell at your side, and for the first time someone else comes and sits beside you. Not to talk, not to ask, just to sit together. And in that shared silence you understand the final truth. The monks did not freeze themselves to cheat death. They froze themselves to find the stillness beneath it, not to escape the world, but to join it in its most patient form. And now you are part of that form, a shape held in pause, a breath that lasts forever, a silence that needs no temple. You don't speak, but you don't need to. The bowl holds the stories, the bell holds the space, and you are what's between them. The listener, the witness, the silence itself.